Hello, I'm Peter Blackwood. Welcome back to Icon Diary. This is a demonstration video being prepared for the Uniting Church Icon School class for March 2022. And it is a demonstration of painting folds on garments. And I hope it is of some help to somebody somewhere. Thank you for watching. Here is the model of the folds that I'm going to demonstrate. It's a model that I painted as a test run in a workshop with Philip Davidov, painting an icon of the crucifix, and this is the loincloth worn by Christ. So we'll set that aside so that I can see it, and so we're mixing burnt umber with egg tempera. What I want to do is to do a bit of an outline so that I get my rough design in. I want to particularly get these folds. Let me just show you so that you can see over on that corner a photo of the model, and I'm particularly wanting to get these folds in here so that we get a trail. Let's check that there. Okay. So now, using I think a Kolinsky 3 brush, let's wet it first and load our burnt umber. Now, for the most part, we're not doing lines here, we're sort of getting outlines in, but it's mainly shadows, because I want this dark burnt umber to show. I'm going to go to a bigger brush because I don't want fine lines here. I want to define the shadings. So I'm staying mindful of the way in which fabric falls and flows and therefore forms shadows. Now here's a trick with these sorts of folds. I'm going to take the shadow in here and stop there. Now take this down here, underneath here and stop there. Do the same here, down and stop, down here and stop. I'm going to mix one of my favourite reds, well, my very favourite red. It's going to be the base colour, so I need a good bit of it, and I'll add quite a lot of egg tempera. But it is way too red, so I will add quite a lot of titanium white. And add a lot more titanium white. So there's a base colour. And a number 4 squirrel. See how this works. I'm going to add more egg to this so that it is more translucent. I want the dark of the burnt umber to still show through, but because this is now has a lot of egg in it, it's much more important now that it goes on in a thin layer, so wiping off the brush each time is important. So I do want to cover that little 4 brush was way too small. I want to have better coverage, because this surface, this is an A3 piece of paper, which is about twice the size of what I normally paint with. So I'm now using a number 8 squirrel. So this is giving very thorough coverage, but I can still see the shading underneath. And we will let that dry. Now, I'm not altogether happy with this colour. I think I want it actually to be darker not more red, but just darker. So let's try this. I'll decant some of the base in there and take some of this burnt umber and see what happens when we add that. And so long as I can still see the shadows underneath, just still there. The reason I was unhappy is that I can see from my model how the dark bits are quite dark, and if I leave that too light, the contrast between the highlight and the shading is going to be more of a problem. The surface is nice and dry again, and I think now we need a number 4 squirrel brush. So I'm using the softer brushes rather than the Kolinsky, and we want to start putting in some highlight. So we'll decant a little bit of the darker mixture that we made and add a little bit of white. We will need a little bit more egg, and stir that in and wipe it off very thoroughly and do a test. Where will we do a test? What about here? I'll just wait for it to dry. I think for a first coverage that's going to be okay. So I'm trying to leave darker pieces. Take that up around there. It's all pretty subtle at the moment. And it's basically getting in, again, highlighted shapes and leaving a few of those darker lines, particularly for interest. One of the things, and I'll say more about this as I'm putting in lighter highlights, is that the brightest highlights, I used to think they came right up against the darkest sections of a fabric, but they don't. They do for some fabrics, like for a satin, for example. The highlight is right up against the darkest bit of shading, and that's because of the way satin and silk works. Now on this fold that goes back and forward on itself, we can take this highlight down and run around the whole lot, and we're encircling those pieces that were came in as shading before. Remember that fancy trick we did? So we come in and do some blending at these highlight points. We'll do a lot more of this later on. This is all very subtle. We need We're going to mix some straight white. I'm starting with the point of the brush and then leaning into it to give this a bit of shape. And what this starts to do is to give the whole garment the look of a white garment. It just happens that the shading is this pinky colour. I'm going to change over to the squirrel. This is the Kolinsky is a bit hard. Need the softer. I was saying before about the lightest highlight coming up close to the shadow, and that with most fabric, taking it close but not quite to the shadow gives the fabric a more of a curved effect. So it needs careful blending. try and glaze over the highlighted bits. Try and even it out a bit. That's better. Now I'm going to go back to this shading and just make sure that there's plenty of definition. So remember how I took this line down here in the beginning and tucked it in there, and took this down here and tucked it in there, and took this down here and tucked it in there. There is a danger of making these too dark. It looks too light at the moment. My hope is, of course, that true to form, it will dry darker. Et voila. I do want this under part here to be darker. It is quite rough. But it has character. Thank you for watching. I must emphasize that there is no one way of doing things, and that's the case for painting highlights on garments. But this particular method is serving me well at the moment. Painting onto paper, watercolor paper, is a bit different from painting onto a panel. It's also, this demonstration is quite large. In retrospect, perhaps I should have done it smaller so that it was more like what I normally paint on a smaller panel. However, the result, while rustic, I hope has a few tips for helping us paint good icons. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.